All right, Geoff Lee, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I'm really looking forward to this. There's a lot of really curious things that you're involved with that I definitely want to hear a little bit more about. Um, I mean, what comes to mind, but I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and go through a little bit about your background in a second. But um, just a teaser. I mean, you're involved in some things around a blockchain bachelorette event or part or show, whatever the case may be, as well as maybe you have a connection to Ryan Reynolds. So we'll talk about that later on, more clarification later on. We'll get to that component. But first and foremost, I'd really love to hear about your background and what led you into sort of the Web3 attorney legal world.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Jeff. I'm a senior associate at Ramo Law, based in LA. We also have an office in New York. Um, my background specifically is in film and television and primarily production legal, right? So I went to Chapman Film School years ago, and then went to law school after that, became an attorney, and just kind of stuck in the production world ever since. And so that's really where I'm coming from in terms of a creative producing background, stepping into the legal world and kind of helping to represent producers, production companies in that space as they navigate, setting up their project up, producing it, taking it out, shopping it, whatever, all the way through distribution. So as production counsel, I think that it's been a really interesting past few years with sort of the I guess the boom of Web3 and NFTs and kind of the inherent crossover between this new media and the entertainment industry, right? So we've seen a lot of producers kind of interested in dipping their toes in that space and figuring out, hey, maybe there's a way that we can utilize our intellectual property in this space that's hopefully some financial benefit, but from what I've seen it's really community driven, and that's the part that I really like about it, especially for producers, is this technology and this this boom really drives a conversation with their consumers directly, where it's to a level where you really just didn't have that before, so I think that's a really interesting space for producers and independent producers and creators to be in.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with you. I think that we're still very early on this. There's
Yeah,
still a lot to happen. So let's, I guess, jump into it. I teased it up in the beginning,
yeah.
but this blockchain bachelorette, the proof of love. Can you can you give us a little bit of a background around that?
Yeah, Proof of Love was that was a fun project. Mad Realities put it on, and they're this group of really young creatives based out of New York that you know they they sold they minted a bunch of NFTs, sold them on the marketplace, and that really drove their show, right? And that's exactly what I was just talking about in terms of engaging with their community. I mean, the scale of this wasn't super huge, right? They put it on YouTube for free. They had almost no marketing. It's all just word of mouth. And the show just kind of blew up in terms of, you have some of the people buying their NFTs, and that comes with permissions and sort of more creative rights, which I think is the really cool part of it, where they can help make casting decisions and have a say in terms of what happens in the show, which this particular show was a dating show, like a bachelorette type concept, or like an old school dating game, right? So they had the bachelorette and then a couple bachelors on stage, and it was all shot live. And they participated in challenges, cook-offs, things like that. And at the end of the day, they can either decide to, if the bachelor was winning, they can either decide to go on a date or take, I think it was like 3 grand cash or whatever the Ethereum equivalent of that was at that time. So it was just a fun, small scale show that was really driven by that community. And like I said, it really, they just put it out there at first. And I think by the end of the finale, they had to run to a bigger theater just because everybody was getting into it.
Very cool. No,
Yeah.
as I went through it, I was stunned. I thought it was a great idea, very clever. So when you think about something like that, out of curiosity, what sort of legal issues come up? You don't have to necessarily cite, of course, this particular incident, but like when you're looking at an organization who wants to do something like this, what are the primary challenges that they come across, be it
Right.
IP
Mhm.
rights or other?
Yeah, so I'm representing them in a as a production counsel. I'm wearing my production counsel hat, right? So as they're doing this, I think that in the Web3 space, there's a lot of conversations about things being decentralized and public ownership of things, and I think that's all great. But from an IP perspective, right, it's all still subject to the same IP laws, at least as of right now, until something changes for this new media. I don't anticipate that, but it's subject to the same copyright laws, same trademark laws, and everything of that nature. So as we're going through that as production counsel, even though these conversations are kind of being had on the ground, I want to make sure that the NFT holders are they're contributing, but also ultimately the production company still needs to hold all those rights. They need the results and proceeds. They need complete chain of title. I think that there's a lot of these projects that are sort of going. It's the Wild West, right? They're just going full speed ahead, and not really necessarily thinking about that and what they want to do with the project afterwards. And again, like this is a very new space. We don't know how this is going to blow up or how where it can go from there. So from an IP perspective, I want to make sure that my client is holding all the rights and they can dispose of the show however they want or exploit it in various different ways, and also just minimizing their legal risk. You know, people get involved. You want to make sure that you got the right releases, the right paperwork, and everything like that. It's very similar to producing a docu-series in that sense. It's for the community, but you want to make sure that nothing is going to come back to sort of bite you at the end of it.
That makes total sense. I've seen the full spectrum on the IP rights, and there's some new trends there, but I'm kind of curious to get your impressions on the IP rights for NFTs like the Bored Ape Yacht Club or CryptoPunks, with Yugo Labs basically saying, you know what, you guys pretty much have total right. Oh, you'll maybe clarify this if you'd like to. You have generally total rights over IP in terms of you can take your, let's say, CryptoPunk or your Bored Ape and you can brand it. So you can create a beer around that, or a water, or a cereal,
Mhm.
all of which have been created in that space. Do you think that's the future of this, or do you think there's going to be lots of different use cases?
I think there's going to be lots of different use cases. I'm not quite sure with the Board Yacht Club. I think that that's a model that they're choosing to stick to. I think there's different models. I think that as this space becomes more and more branded, particularly with bigger, more institutional brands, like I'm thinking about the Meta Birkin case, right? You got a giant luxury brand coming in to enforce their IP rights. I think that it is a choose your own adventure type of way to go about it for whoever the IP originators are, whether it's the Board Yacht Club or Hermes, right? One group may not necessarily care about how the images or whatever is being used in subsequent uses, but then you have a brand like Hermes who is really going to care about that and be really protective over their trademarks and their other IP, so to say. So on that side, it's going to be a lot more controlling. You might own, say, I'm not quite sure what Nike's doing, but with Nike, I imagine if you buy a Nike NFT, you have that NFT, but you're not getting any other rights to the Nike swoosh or the Air Force One silhouette. That's sticking with Nike, and they're going to be wanting to use that however they want in other products.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. The older brands that are getting involved in this
Hmm.
now are going to try to hold on to that IP as long as possible and probably
Yeah,
forever, right? But it's
yeah.
the newer brands that are trying to make a splash and make a change and get
Mhm.
their names out there that are probably going to lend themselves out to the sort of IP rights that you can take advantage of and use in any way that you'd like for the
Right.
most part, right? So,
Yeah, and that I think goes back to, these younger, more newly established brands. That goes back to that community that they're building. I think that for Board A Yacht Club, or other people that are doing that and more gung ho about, yeah, you can use this however you want. They're building that community, and that's something that is going to be really strong 5, 10 years from now. And they might be able to build something much more valuable than they would have if they just held on to everything. It kind of depends on what they do with that IP and how they translate it into something else, but that there is an opportunity there.
fair enough. No, I think there absolutely is myself too. All right. So I'm kind of curious if you've gone down this road or you've had any clients come to you and start talking about this. So more the scuttlebutt in this space legally around DAOs. Have you seen or heard anybody starting DAOs? Have you worked with DAOs at all at this stage?
I haven't. I've been strictly just really on the IP side of how do we take something that we have created, and really enter this space and leverage that to build a community, build something that people can gather around, enjoy, consume, hopefully profit off of. And so
No,
that's my primary focus.
absolutely. All right. No, that's great. Okay, so let's talk about your exposure, your connection into Welcome to Wrexham. How are you involved in that and some other projects that you're involved with as well?
Yeah, so like I said, we're production counsel on, so many feature films. I don't even know the number anymore. Feature films, scripted series. I primarily focus on documentaries and docu-series, in the traditional film and television media space. And so, we represent Boardwalk Pictures, who produces that documentary, the docu-series Welcome to Wrexham. So I've been there kind of from the start, and that's been a fun one to be on. It's Ryan Reynolds, McElnenny. There was whispers of them buying a team over in the UK and doing a docu-series about it. And then my client got on board. And so we've been there from the start, just kind of seeing this evolve. And I think what they've done, not only, I mean, the show is great, but what those two guys have done in terms of buying this team, sort of turning it around and building something out of it. Like, I think they're still like fifth division, uh, English soccer. It's they're
Right.
they're not they're not in the Premier League, right? They're
Working their way
pretty
up.
far down there. They're working their way up. Hopefully, there's a promotion coming fairly soon. But like, just the resources that they've been able to pump into that, it's amazing. So yeah, I've been production counsel on that. Kind of guiding them as they're out in the field in Wales, and navigating various production issues. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. That's great. All right, so taking off your attorney hat, I'm kind of curious the the feeling, the essence of what's going on in LA right now when it comes to people getting involved in this Web3 space, both just the community at large, but
Mhm.
also I'd love to hear a little bit more about, do you have a lot of um, attorney friends, colleagues that have started to get into this space?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's a space that everybody's kind of rushing into. I think that outside of representation in this space, there's also just a lot of buzz creatively. We're entering a time in the industry where less and less projects are getting picked up. Budgets are getting hacked and decreasing, by the minute, basically. It's a tough market out there to set up a show. And once you do set up a show, it's probably not going to be the budget that you wish it was. And so I think creatively, people are really looking towards alternative forms of funding, and getting projects made. I think that's where this is a really interesting space to be in terms of, if you can raise the budget that you do want, create your project and release it on your own terms. You're not really beholden to a network or a studio in a way that you traditionally were. And it's also just a way, again, to connect with your audience more directly. You're producing a project for a specific set of people, essentially. And so it's more tailor-made content in that regard. And that might mean that it's a smaller scale. It might not mean that it's a smaller scale. Like, there's been some pretty big projects. I think Mila Kunis funded her own animated show through the sale of NFTs. And it's a new and independent way to kind of get the cash flow that you need to create your art and get it out there to people that actually want to see it.
Absolutely. All right, last question I'm kind of curious about, and then I'd leave it up to you if there's anything else you wanted to bring up. For those attorneys that you've worked with or that you've communicated with, colleagues, whatever the case is, what backgrounds have they typically had, and then they've fallen into this space? Is it all strictly IP and copyright, or are there other spaces, practices that people have had in the past that they sort of brought into this?
Yeah, I think for the most part, just the people that I discuss, because I have that entertainment background, it is a small space. So a lot of people that I'm dealing with are coming directly from entertainment as well, or some sort of, whether it's film, television, music, any sort of arts, really. People are kind of poking their head around it and seeing what's going on over here in this space. Outside of that, it's a lot of younger attorneys, which is exciting. It's it's people that I went to law school with, and people that are around the same generation of attorneys as I am, and it's fun because these are it's the brain trust, so to speak, of the next generation. Like, I think that whatever's happening in this space is going to have significant implications for years to come. And just seeing my peers be a part of that is really exciting.
All right, I lied. I have one more question because
Yeah.
you sort of made me think about something else. Do you think that most people that are moving into this space naturally get it, or is there a lot of kind of wrapping the head and arms around some of this?
Mhm.
Because the concepts are honestly very different than what we're traditionally used to when you start talking about decentralization, potentially
Right.
owning your own keys, all of that sort of thing. Is that something you think comes natural to most of the people in this space, or just takes a while?
I think it takes a while. I think that there are people where it just comes naturally because it's something that it's a new form of something that they've been doing for years already. Like, I think right now I'm thinking of Bobby Hundred specifically. He's got a book. I think the book was even prior. It's been out for a few years, so it's not necessarily focused on Web3 and NFTs, although he is in that space heavily now with his own projects through his company. But it's this sort of thing just comes natural to him. His analogy is sort of like it's kind of like the collecting trading cards as a kid and things like that. So I think there are people out there that it just clicks with them and people get it. That said, I think that this space has a really, I don't want to call it a high barrier to entry, but there are people that just don't understand it, and that's a battle for the community and the thought leaders of this particular industry to figure out a way to make it more accessible for the people that don't necessarily understand all the technology or understand the why or the how of it all. I think that that's something that collectively it needs to be figured out so that more people can sort of step into the space and sort of see what's going on.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's sometimes just the language, even the beginnings of NFTs,
Hmm.
non-fungible tokens. Now, does that really make sense? It makes sense,
Yeah.
yes, but that doesn't carry well for people. Make it
Right.
collectibles, make it digital assets, something that people can
Hmm.
understand right out of the gate than some random acronym or
Exactly.
whatever the case is, right? So
Yeah.
that's what, yes,
Yeah.
as a group, we have to work on collectively, I think. But all
Yeah.
right, Jeff, anything else that you'd like to bring up?
No, I mean it's been great talking to you, and I appreciate you having me on.
Of course, my goodness. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I appreciate it.